the fact is that the pressure is just growing from the other side of the channel, because they know they're going to be able to get here, and having arrived, they're going to be able to stay, not necessarily granted asylum, but that's not the point. The fact is that whether they're granted asylum or not, they're not being removed. And that, I'm afraid, together with all the other attractions of housing and spending money and all sorts of things that are being provided, that in itself draws people, and they will keep coming. I'm afraid the traffickers, the smugglers, they are not going to ease up as a result of the Royal Navy being deployed in the English Channel.
Right. Well, nobody seems very sure what the Navy would actually be able to do, and whether their presence would actually make things even worse.
Potentially, it could make things even worse. We don't know what they're going to do. The Navy or the MOD itself has said that what they're going to do is actually make sure that no one can get in without being spotted. Now, it's what happens after that. If they're going to be picking them up in mid-channel, and all you've got is bigger, better, more efficient vessels to pick up people and then bring them ashore, it's what happens after that. Where do they go to? Where they're going to be held? Where are they going to be interviewed? If they're going to be taken to a camp, say Manston Airport, the old RAF airport, if they're going to be taken there and dealt with there and not allowed into the country until their cases are considered and a decision is taken, then fine. But I just wonder if that's really what's going to happen. As for not telling us what is going on, I think that's one of the battier ideas to come out of the government recently. I mean, this isn't a case of figures that we wouldn't normally be aware of and they're keeping from us. Everyone knows what's going on in the Channel. All sorts of people, reporters, politicians even, are getting out there and saying 1, 2, 3, 4. They're counting them. The people who work within the system, there are all sorts of leaks about the numbers. If the government seriously thinks that by not telling us officially it's not happening, then I think they've gone mad.
Yes, well, quite.
From a point of view of managing the media, I think that too, as a former government press officer, spokesman, whoever of my former colleagues was advising the government to do this, I think should look at themselves closely in the mirror.
Yes, well, I'm afraid the UK Statistics Authority seems to have got their hobnail boots involved in this one, and anything they get involved in never ends well. They're talking about doing quarterly figures instead of monthly, which doesn't exactly fill you with confidence that they're making any changes anytime soon, if we're going to wait 3 months to wait for the next set of figures, does it?
Well, they've said that this is not their decision. This is the Home Office making this decision. It's ministers who've made this decision. All they said, I gather, and this is all sort of second, third hand, was that maybe we should think again about giving daily figures, but give them frequently, but not necessarily every day, which is very different to saying we're going to issue them quarterly.
Yes.
And frankly, it's just not going to work anyway. And ultimately, the figures will get distorted, will get exaggerated. So it will actually come back to bite the government.
Yeah, almost certainly.
The other thing that I've heard, I don't know whether it's true or not, I haven't heard it personally from anyone, but that the whole of the Channel's crossing control is going to be handed over to the MOD.
Yeah.
Well, maybe if the control is going to be handed over to them, it's one thing, but ultimately immigration policy is the Home Office's. it's the Home Office that really deals with immigration policy, so they can't distance themselves from it.
Well, and also UK Border Force is a sort of an arm of the Home Office, right? So what are you going to have? You're going to have the MOD attempting to tell Border Force what to do. That's not going to work. And we've already got the most woke Border Force in the world, you know, because we've got people in Border Force who don't think they should be actually protecting the border, which is a rather perverse position to adopt if you want to be a Border Force officer, it seems to me. But they're now apparently threatening to challenge the government on the fact that they're being asked to return people to France. And here's another one for you from the old High Court. Apparently they've now ruled that basically Home Office social workers acted unlawfully when they carried out age assessments on young asylum seekers, because you know that, you know, supposedly we're led to believe that you can be a child under the asylum seeker rules up to the age of 23. They basically wrongly assessed them as adults, according to the court, and so now they'll all be kids again. You know, it's like going Back to the Future.
Well, yes,
isn't it?
Of kids. Before I come back to that, it reminded me this morning when I first heard of my kids when they were little, and we'd be playing, and they say, "Oh, I'm not here, Daddy." The Home Office is effectively saying, "Oh no, there's nothing going on."
Yeah, nothing to see here.
That's crazy. On the age assessment, it's something that's concerned us, and in fact, we did a paper on it a couple of weeks ago, where you're right. If until it's established definitively that the person's age is 18 or lower, then they're to be treated as children, which is totally absurd. Pending that final decision, then they can go into housing, they can go into welfare, into the welfare system, they can go into schools as children. That is dangerous, frankly, and that is something that I'm glad that the court has seen sense over.
Right.
And it's time that we took this responsibility away from social workers. The new legislation going through is going to use scientific evidence, which is to be welcomed,
right,
and will bring us into line with a number of other countries.
But then there's plenty of human rights lawyers lining up to say that won't be allowed because it will be against people's human rights to be able to kind of test them for dental records or anything else, or possibly even DNA. You know, the whole thing, though, Alp, surely is in need of massive reform, which requires massive decision-making, which requires massive strength of character. Because at the end of the day, you can build as many barracks as you want, you can bring as many people in as you want, you can help them get here or stop them getting here. The point is that surely the point about why they come here is because they know that their lives will be improved. And somehow that has to stop, doesn't it?
Yeah, somehow it does have to stop. It's been somehow going to stop for a long, long time, and I don't see it coming anytime soon, to be honest. But you're absolutely right. The people who are coming here by one way or other are finding ways, often through the legal system, but also because we tend to be seen as a softer touch. We are the evidence of proof, the standard of proof required to show that you are a refugee is much lower than it is in some of the European countries. I mean, France will accept many fewer, a much lower proportion of people for asylum than we do. And that applies to most countries. And a lot of those who are coming over have actually already applied and been turned down for asylum in other countries, sometimes in more than one country, frankly. And we're the last point of destination because we're a safe bet.
Yes, I think that's right. And at the end of the day, I've had all sorts of different politicians on this show, including the chair of the Immigration Committee, whose name I forget for the moment. But I said to him, can you tell me precisely what happens once the refugees arrive on the shores, the illegal migrants, whatever you want to call them, and they're shipped off to either a barracks or a hotel or whatever it is? How long do they stay there? And his assertion was, only a couple of days. Which is clearly wrong, because we know just from anecdotal evidence that there are huge numbers of hotels in parts of the country, in towns all over the country, which are occupied more or less permanently by asylum seekers, and nobody from the outside world can get a room in there because they're fully booked by Serco or whatever. You know, there's people making an awful lot of money out of this system, and after that, nobody seems to know where they go either. And it seems to me that there's absolutely no kind of accountability from the Home Office as to what's going on.
Yeah, well, perhaps that's why they want to hand it all over to the MOD, because they haven't been able to deal with it. So give another government department the responsibility of taking the flak. But you're right. This is why I suggest that once migrants arrive, then they are held in a camp, but in secure surroundings, allowed to walk out if they want to, but at that point they become illegal all over again, effectively, and they will never be granted asylum or permission to stay here. So that will be at least an incentive to make sure that they stay on in camps. But the camps, some of them do stay only for a short time. But the short time is really that it starts when they arrive at Dover, and they are interviewed initially. They're fingerprinted. I don't know whatever it is that they do. Then there are follow-up interviews that take place. But pending those follow-up interviews and the final decision, they will go into hotels. They will go into accommodation provided by local authorities, and this is where the costs escalate. And
it's our cost. It's us that are paying for that.
Yeah, last year I think it was getting on for £800 million just on those who were arriving across the Channel. That is clearly batty. It's clearly daft.
Well, I mean, the whole thing is a sham, isn't it, at the end of the day? Because we know one thing for sure. All of those people who came last year are still here, 28,000, 30,000, whatever it is. We also know, and I know this from people that speak to me on a regular basis from the southeast coast of this country, that there's plenty of people who come in who nobody knows about, because they're not brought in by RNLI boats, they're not brought in by Border Force, they come on dinghies, they land in parts of southeast Sussex and Kent, where there isn't any protection, really. There aren't any, because you can't man the entire beach all the way from, sort of Rye round the corner to Eastbourne, and they just get off the boats and walk into town. Simple. And nobody sees them ever again.
Well, I'm afraid that's absolutely right. And in fact, that also suits a lot of those who are coming in and the traffickers, because they don't want to be identified or picked up or held. They just want the freedom to be able to slip into the shadow economy, sometimes slip into criminality in the way that the gangsters who are running the show have a hold on them, over them. So, absolutely. If the MOD is going to make sure that all those who make it across, whether clandestinely or indeed are picked up in mid-channel, because they say, here I am. If everyone is actually going to be picked up, don't forget that there's a lot who come in the backs of lorries still. We reckon around 9,000 or 10,000 a year there as well.
I mean, I was told by immigration officials that traffic had more or less stopped altogether. Is that not true?
I mean, if immigration officials are saying that, who am I to argue with them? But that I very much doubt, frankly. If they are not coming in the backs of lorries and crossing in dinghies instead, well, maybe the numbers have come down, and we don't know for sure. But I would doubt very much. But certainly,
overall, as you've said, we know the numbers are going up, and they're not likely to stop going up. And the threat of arrest and the threat of detention to these traffickers, I mean, it's a bit like saying to drug dealers, well, you might go to prison. Well, they already know that, but they do it because they're making so much money.
No, that's exactly it. Huge amounts of money. And this is where, I hate to say it, because it in a way gives a let-out clause for the government. But I think that the EU and France also have a role here, and they're playing politics. And frankly, by doing so, they are also shooting themselves in the foot, because it's in everyone's interest, really, EU continental countries as well as us, to try and stem the flow of illegal immigration, of people going from one country to another, trying their luck here, trying their luck there, and a lot of them ending up in this neck of the woods.
Yes.
They're not genuine asylum seekers as such. And we know that from things that the EU commissioners themselves have said to us, that Ylva Johansson, the EU Home Affairs Commissioner, she said last August that the vast majority of people who claim asylum are not genuine refugees. Well, what more can you say? So my argument there would be, so why don't you do something about it rather than giving them a free run?
Exactly right. It seems extraordinary that we have the same conversation, and it's no reflection on you, Alp, but I mean, we've been having this conversation for a very long time and nobody seems to do anything about it. But thank you very much indeed. We've got to run. Alp Mehmet, Chairman of Migration Watch UK.